I'd like to talk about how we can improve your nutrition. So nutrition support, especially when you may experience side effects or may experience side effects from sort of chemotherapy, targeted therapy, radiotherapy, or anything like that. So if you have a low appetite, if you're feeling full, then prioritize your carbohydrates and your protein, because they're going to be your most important nutritional sources. So your carbohydrates are going to be your first line of energy for your body to nourish it, and your protein and carbohydrates and your fats are also going to contain most of your calories rather than your fruits and vegetables. It's not to say you can't have your fruits and vegetables, still have them, but if you are to only have something, then maybe have more of your carbohydrates and protein rather than focusing on your fruits and vegetables. Make sure you have a regular meal pattern, because again, when you've not got an appetite or when you're feeling full, you're not going to want to eat because you won't have those hunger cues anymore. So instead of actually saying, I'll eat when I'm hungry, because actually that might not happen. And you might find that if you do that, you go throughout the whole day without eating. And that's more of a concern, because we don't want you to be starving yourself. So make sure you have a regular meal pattern, set yourself times, but maybe just have something small, something easy to eat, but just making sure you're having it frequently. Smaller portions are always best, because then you're not feeling overwhelmed. And if it's a family member or so, I always say, you know, if your family, because often it will be family members that are cooking for you and they'll probably want you to eat lots. They might be, you know, really good at feeding you, but actually it's really hard to eat all of it. So I always suggest, you know, ask them to put it on a tea plate or something, or if they bring out a big plate, just grab your own tea plate and just dish out your own portion from that portion that they've given you. So that gives you a way of controlling your portion size yourself. Again, try to fortify your food, to adding plenty of butter, cheese, cream into mashed potatoes, into soups, into your pasta, things like that, to try and fortify it. So you're thinking per mouthful, as many calories, as much protein as possible, because we know with a low appetite and feeling full, the number of mouthfuls going in per day is going to be limited anyway. So we want to make sure you're as well nourished as possible. Again, you might find that nourishing drinks are quite easy to get down, because when you don't have an appetite, the last thing you probably want is a 3-course meal where you have to sit down with a knife and fork to eat it. You know, you want to be going for quick, softer diet, you know, fork mashable foods that you can just eat with a fork, doesn't require as much effort to chew, doesn't require as much time to eat it as well. And nourishing drinks, you know, it could be either supplements, it could be homemade drinks, you know, blend up some fruit with some milk and a dollop of ice cream, some cream, you know, having some added seeds into that, you know, extra things to give you the nourishment, the calories and the protein. By all means, that, you know, fruit smoothies are a good way to get the extra minerals and vitamins in, but if you make it up with milk, that's a good way of getting the extra calories in as well. So how to improve your nutrition when you're tired or you're fatigued. So I always say carbohydrates is key, because that is going to be your main source of energy. So making sure you're almost eating around the clock and eating little and often, so that you're fueling your body with energy each time. There's no harm in putting things in the freezer, batch cooking, so that you don't have to spend as much time cooking all the time. You know, having even frozen vegetables, frozen fruit, that's fine for you to have. Tinned fruit, or even like jars of sauces or things like that, it's fine for you to use those for the time being, because we know it's only going to be temporarily this period of time when you're feeling so unwell that we can use this. And often it is always best to cook from fresh, because there's less salt, less fat and things like that. But this moment in time, if you're struggling with fatigue and tiredness and you're losing weight as a result of it, actually we want to make sure you're as well nourished as possible. Again, if you have taste changes, some people say that, you know, red meat particularly can taste quite metallic. So often I just say avoid it. You know, don't have the red meat, have a better alternative or a different alternative. You know, have your chicken or your turkey, try it with mince, or can you season the meat with some herbs, spices, just to try and mask that taste. Sometimes even eating with metal cutlery can make food taste a bit metallic, so it might be worth trying to use wooden, you know, spoon or fork or knife, you know, or you know, using plastic or something. But I always say, you know, if something tastes off, try adding different herbs, spices, lemon, limes, just to try and make the taste a bit different. But if it doesn't taste right, just don't have it for the time being, and just maybe have it in a couple of weeks' time. I always say don't rule it out completely, just park it to one side and then reintroduce it at a later date, because actually over the period of your treatment you might find that your taste changes quite quickly. So one thing might taste awful now, but actually in a couple of weeks later it might not. But just make sure that you're having suitable alternatives to replace that nutrition as well. If you're feeling, if you're struggling with nausea and vomiting, what I would suggest is don't starve yourself, because actually sometimes being sick on an empty stomach just makes things worse, because you're always constantly retching and nothing's coming out, and you're not bringing anything up. So I'd always say just have something small so you can easily digest it, but then it settles that kind of stomach a bit more. Have little and often. And always try and make sure you take your anti-sickness medication before meals, so roughly about 20 to 30 minutes beforehand, to make sure that it kicks in before you then start to tackle in your meal. And if you're not on any anti-sickness medication, it becomes a recurrent issue and that's stopping you from eating, just speak to your doctor, your GP, and see if they can prescribe you some so that it can help you with the symptom. Identify any food triggers. Sometimes people find that actually hot foods, the smell of the hot food just triggers the nausea. Then don't have hot food, have cold food. Try having sandwiches or hummus with some, veggie sticks or something like that. Just something small that you think you could manage. Go for what you fancy. Again, sort of have a little experiment with the foods, see if you can notice any food triggers in particular, if it's certain smells or certain tastes, if it's blander foods that you prefer. Have a look and go by how you feel. And sometimes people might find that their nausea is worse at certain times in the day. To see if that's you. Some people find that actually their nausea is worse in the morning, but it gets better as the day goes on. And if that's the case, time your meals around it. So don't not eat at all, but just have a small amount in the morning when the nausea is worst. And actually when the nausea starts settling in the evening, have a bit bigger meal and make up for it by having little snacks throughout the day. Some people say, and I've got a picture of some ginger there, and that's just to say that some people find that ginger helps, whether it's ginger to cook with or ginger in hot water and some lemon, something like that. I don't know if it's evidence-based. I don't really endorse it, but that's what I've heard. So there's no harm in trying that as well. What can I do to keep myself healthy? So actually, if you're not in the category that we just spoke about, actually your appetite is fine, you're just wanting to know what I can do to keep myself healthy, whilst that's on treatment, whether that's off treatment, whether that's after treatment, whether that you're in remission, whatever state you're in, as long as you're fit and well, you've got a good appetite, there's no nutritional concerns, you just want to know what to do with your diet, what's best, then I'd recommend sort of looking at the World Cancer Research Fund. And this is a very, very large organization, very large charity. It's endorsed lots and lots of funding into international research. And so you have these international panel of experts who've looked across thousands of studies, compiled them all together, critically analysed to find out what relation there is between diet, weight, exercise and cancer. And they've come up with several recommendations, which is based on this today. Again, if you look on the World Cancer Research Fund and look in the dietary recommendations or healthy diet, then you can go into more detail from there. But first, it asks you to be a healthy weight. So if you find that if you're at the moment overweight, then actually gradual weight loss might be quite ideal, and roughly we'd look about 400 to 600 calorie deficit. So if you're currently maintaining your weight from what you're eating, but you're overweight and you're wanting to lose a few pounds each week, then actually removing about 400 to 600 calories from your diet, we will see roughly about 1 to 2 pound weight loss over the next over each week. And that's gradual weight loss, and we want that if that is the case, and we want it to be gradual because we want to make sure you maintain your muscle mass, but also it's lifestyle choices, it's sustainable for your lifestyle as well. You would we'd recommend diet rich in whole grains, so things like your brown bread, brown pasta, brown rice, basmati rice, whole grains, whole grain rice, and wild rice, beans, pulses, lentils, and things like sort of sweet potatoes, potatoes with the skin on, vegetables and fruit. So high fiber. Aiming for at least 5 portions of fruit and vegetables a day, and beans and pulses would count towards one of those. If you're having a glass of orange juice or a glass of fresh juice, that I think it's about 120 milliliters would count as one of your 5 a day. Anything more is just excessive, so I'd probably avoid that. Just have 1 glass a day, but you want to be aiming for at least 5 portions of different fruit and vegetables. So almost go for a rainbow colour, I'd suggest. Try and avoid fast foods or foods that are high in fat or high in sugar, again, because they tend to be very high in saturated fat or refined sugar. So this is not necessarily the carbohydrate sugar that we're talking about, but this is foods that are almost like your sweets, your chocolates, your biscuits, cakes and things like that. Foods that are high in fat, your pastries, your chips, your crisps, things like that that are fried. And that again will be excessive amounts of calories, which will lead to weight gain, and weight gain is the increased risk of cancer. Try and limit your consumption of red meat and limit your consumption of processed meat. So I know there was a question about sort of limiting red meat as well, because red meat tends to be very high in iron, and that's good and is important. Otherwise, if you're low in iron, you feel quite tired and fatigued. And other alternative sources of iron, if it is red meat that you're completely eliminating from your diet, would be things like liver, beans and pulses, green leafy vegetables, so things like your broccoli, spinach, kale. They would be really high sources of iron, but also recommend that if you're having iron, then actually to try and have it with a glass of juice, or a glass of juice that contains vitamin C, because vitamin C helps improve the absorption of iron, specifically plant-based iron. Try and limit your processed meat. So processed meat would be things like your sausages, your burgers, cured meat, smoked meat, because actually you've just got excessive fat, excessive preservatives, and excessive just salt in those as well. So red meat in moderation is fine. Having 3 portions per week is fine. What you can do is have, your non-meat alternatives, or you can go for your chicken or your turkey, your leaner meats. You can go for your corn, your soya, sort of bits of, your beans and pulses, lentils. I always say, it's quite helpful because sometimes people don't like the taste of corn, or they find that it's not as strong as meat. So you can always do half and half. That's quite a good way. So you do half your minced beef, half minced corn, mix it together, add in lentils as well to thicken it up to make it more of a sauce. And then you've got really high nourishing, high in protein, but also reduces your consumption of red meat as well. Limit your consumption of sugar sweetened drinks, so things like your fizzy drinks. Try not to drink any alcohol. If you do want a glass here or there, make sure you limit yourself to the national guidelines, which is your 14 units per week. Try to spread it over 3 to 4 days, and try to have at least 2 or 3 days of alcohol free. Try and move more and be active. So it really involves exercise as well. I think the general recommendations are about 150 minutes per week of moderate intensity. So that's almost like 30 minutes 5 days a week. That's kind of what we're looking at. And it could be things like gardening, fast-paced walking. So when we say moderate intensity, it's almost like you're a bit out of breath, you can talk, but you can't sing. Or the alternative, instead of moderate intensity, you could go for high intensity, and about roughly it's recommended about 75 minutes of high intensity per week. So that'd be like running or fast cycling or something like that. So you're really out of breath when you're doing the activity or the exercise. So in addition to World Cancer Research Fund, what their recommendations does actually tie really nicely to NHS national guidelines for healthy eating. So obviously this is the Eat Well plate, which often is very, you've probably already come across already, which talks about the different proportions of the food groups in relation to each other. As you can see from this diet, it is very much based on, your fruit and vegetables, making sure you're having at least 5 portions per day. Again, basing your meals around your carbohydrates, but choosing the whole grain or high fiber versions so that you've got that nourishment from there. Limiting your protein intake, but making sure you do have some. Try to limit your red meat, making sure you're having fish, your non-meat alternatives, and also including your dairy or your dairy alternatives as well, to make sure you've got adequate calcium. Limit your high saturated fats, and also your sugary foods as well, and make sure you're drinking plenty.
Getting back to exercise after a diagnosis of ovarian cancer is not easy. Okay, and I've worked over the years with a lot of people in your position. So everybody's so different, and I've seen that so much through the years. But what I've really seen a lot of is how, with the right confidence and with the right level, everybody can get back to exercise to the extent that they can manage. Okay, so what I'd like to do today is give you confidence, inspire you a little bit to get moving. and to enjoy exercise. Okay, now for some of you might think, oh my gosh, I've never enjoyed exercise, why would I enjoy it now? But hopefully I'll show you why and how. Yeah, so I'm Sally. I'm a cancer rehab physio. So I work in Yorkshire, live up in Yorkshire, and I treat people with any form of cancer and try and guide them through how to keep themselves going, how to keep themselves fit, well, and deal with issues as they come up. So my first question to all of you, and this is for you just to have just a moment in just reflecting on for yourself. How has ovarian cancer affected you? It's a huge question. It's a huge question. And just take a little moment just to see what pops into your head. Okay, now there'll be so much. There'll be so much for all of you. I'm going to just take you down a few further questions that you might kind of have a bit of an association with, we'll see. So, do you find yourself easily exhausted or lacking energy? Do you have difficulty relaxing or sleeping? Yeah. Has your balance and coordination been affected? Yeah. Do you feel weaker or stiffer in your muscles and joints? You're experiencing shortness of breath or feeling more breathless more often? Yeah. Are you struggling to get back to work or to manage tasks at home? Do you have new difficulties with bladder or bowels? Okay, so those questions are huge, aren't they? Now, how do we use exercise to try and target some of those? That's the important question that we've got to answer today. And it's not a cure-all, obviously, but exercise, from my understanding, from my practice, from my learning of the literature, is something that can give you a bit of sense of control. So it's something that you can do for yourself and that you can work towards some of those areas that we've just thought about in trying to build back up some of those issues. Okay, so exercise, you know, is not just about the trainers, it's not about the lycra, it's not about that at all. What it's about is about movement. It's about moving over that cancer diagnosis and trying to use your movement as a way of helping yourself through some of those issues. Okay, so we'll have a little look in a bit more detail as to what exercise can be useful for, and go from there. So I'll work around in a sort of a clockwise direction around this. Now, the top one, improve your bone health. Now, I'm sure many of you will have issues with your bone health after having had a lot of cancer treatment. Now, exercise can be really useful at giving some weight bearing through the bones in order to try and prevent that bone loss that some of you might be struggling with. Again, not the cure-all at all, but definitely something to use as a tool in your toolbox. Okay, so those of you who know that you've got issues with bone density, you know, it's a really important one. Okay, coming down there, we've got reduced anxiety and depressive symptoms. And I think this is one of the biggest elements for me where exercise can have the most dramatic impact. Using exercise as a way of calming the body and lifting the body can be really powerful. Okay. The next one round, we've got increased muscle mass. Now, there is never a time that you can't, through exercise, do something for your muscles. Okay. Even on those days when you are absolutely exhausted, just tightening your muscles and letting them go, and tightening them and letting them go, is keeping the muscles going. Okay, so again, it's not the lycra. It doesn't have to be about the lycra and the trainers. It's about a little bit of what you can manage when you can manage. Okay, so muscle mass, yes, you can. Anybody can. Keep that in check. Keep building it. Okay, moving around, to improve your bladder and bowel function. Now, there have been questions put through already on this one, and pelvic floor exercises are really, really important. Now, again, they won't change the world, but they can be really helpful if done right and done regularly, really helpful at helping you to kind of control any issues that may have come up through surgery or through deconditioning, or just generally through the effects of the cancer. So that's important. The next one, again, is another real crucial one. Improve your sleep and reduce fatigue. Now, I imagine you would all wish to be able to do that. That's a hugely important thing. And again, using exercise, and we'll come to this in more detail in a bit, but using exercise for fatigue particularly is really important. Okay, and we'll come to how you do that in a little bit. Now, reducing comorbidities. So again, with cancer treatment particularly, many of you may have experienced heart and lung, not necessarily complications, but almost, you know, your heart and lungs can potentially be influenced by some of your chemo treatments. And the exercise for building that sort of heart and lung volume up, again, really important for kind of almost preventing problems coming from that neck of the woods. Improving your quality of life, again, really, really important. Having that sense of control. You know, people often say when they come to me, you have so much done to you when you go through cancer treatment, that for you, being able to do something for yourself in under your own steam, at your own pace, at your own time, can really give you that sense of, you know, improving your quality of life. And the last one, again, definitely really, really important, improving your balance. So again, with chemo, you might find that you've lost some sensation in your hands and your feet. You can't quite feel where you are quite as well. And that gives a lot of issues for a safety point of view and from an independence point of view. And again, improving your balance, which again, with simple exercises, you can keep a level on. Okay, so there we go. Right, now I've got some tips for you. And the first tip is very simple. And we'll go through these tips and we'll see what we think. So the first one is avoid inactivity. Okay, so it sounds really obvious, but actually is really important to kind of keep in your mind. So move your body is the most simple and most useful thing I could say to any of you today. So deconditioning can occur really quickly, and it can have a real compounding, real build-up effect. The less you do, the less you're able to do. And you'll know this. I'm talking to people who know this. And almost the effect of the cancer itself is one thing, and that's the difficult journey that you go through. The added complications of inactivity on top of that can be really tricky. And as I say here, it can make recovery more difficult, and it can make the survival itself harder, and can give lifelong complications. So you've got a lot to deal with. You know, you've got the cancer, you've got the treatments. Inactivity in itself is something that can be part of that and can make things harder, but moving your body stops that. Okay, so some things you can change. This is the great thing in life, isn't it? There are some things we can change, some things we can't change. Let's do the things we can. Okay, and it's that moving your body, trying to prevent that deconditioning is the thing that you guys can do. Okay, you go with the cancer journey in terms of the treatment and what the cancer brings, but for what you can do, it's the moving of your body. Okay, so when it comes to where you guys are at, there will be lots of reasons why you might not be moving. And sometimes those things are really important to look at and to work out what they are, because that can help you to work out how to go forward. So is it pain that's stopping you? Is it stiffness? Is it fear? Is it fatigue? You know, all these things can have a really important part in stopping you from moving. And for you to try and understand which bit of those is stopping you will then help you to sort of say, okay, well, look, if it's pain, and I've popped down here, you know, see a physio, cancer rehab physio if you can, NHS physio, a nurse, GP, somebody who you can get a bit of a hold on as to, is this pain something I need to stop movement with, or can I change the way I move? And I think that's, again, a really, really important part for you to work through in your own minds as to what's stopping me moving. Am I afraid? Or does it hurt? Or am I just stiff? And if I'm just stiff, okay, well, I could probably get that going a bit. you know, using that to kind of get yourself working out your plan. Now, in terms of getting moving, short regular sessions to start with, particularly, you know, particularly if you're going through chemo at the moment, particularly if you are still exhausted from another round of chemo, little and often. You know, you'll know it, you've been told it lots of times, but little and often is really important. Don't wait, you know, don't throw all your energy at a huge walk when you then can't go and do the washing up afterwards. Okay. Tip 2, so get a functional assessment. Now, this slide is here in the very big hope that you guys could find a cancer rehab physio near you. Now, there are some around. If you can find them, brilliant. I'm a pink and steel physio. That's one type of cancer rehab physio. But go to your GP and see if you can find somebody. If you feel you need guidance with that pain or with that stiffness, go to somebody who can guide you, because actually you're all different. Everybody has such a different experience of cancer and cancer treatment, and your bodies will be so different from how they were, you know, even before everybody's bodies were different. You know, make sure that you, before you throw yourself at something, that you know where you're at and you had somebody check you out if you're worried about things. Okay. And make sure that you sort of almost check in on yourself as you start doing that exercise. Just check in on yourself each time and see what kind of effect you're having. Okay, tip 3, be proactive about doing things to decrease stress. Okay, now this is hard. So there is, I'm going to read this because it's so important. I think there's no way to navigate a cancer diagnosis without a tremendous amount of stress. Absolute given. Much of the stress that goes along with that diagnosis is related to the uncertainty that accompanies it. Okay, and too much of that stress, you know, it leaves you absolutely battered. The things that we know through personal experience, through literature, through evidence that's been found, is that we know that exercise, we know that meditation and gardening, they help. Okay, and you'll know that, you'll know yourselves that you feel better after a bit of a walk, you feel better after, you know, getting out and getting going. Doing it outside is definitely a really important one as well. So connecting with nature, all these things that we know at our heart that really help us. So hopefully you can use that exercise to decrease that stress. And then really importantly, do it together. So you're going to meet someone, you go, you do it. You have the good chat, you distract yourself. Together we're better. So very much from a kind of stress point of view and from an exercise point of view, get your friends on board, get your families on board. Okay, tip 4, prioritize exercise each week. Okay, now you will, I have no doubt, prioritize many things in your life. You'll prioritize your families, you'll prioritize jobs that need to be done, you'll prioritize everybody else, prioritize yourself as well as all those other things. It's really important, and a big part of that is exercise. So it's looking after yourself. Now, having the energy to do that is sometimes hard, and it's a little bit of a vicious circle, but making sure that you give yourself that time each day to exercise is really, really important for you. Really, really important for you. It's a medicine. So exercise is medicine. We know it helps with stress. We know it helps with quality of life and with sleep and with fatigue. We know those things. So it's really, really important. So how much to do? This is the next question. So it's recommended, I'm just going to say it and you're all going to think, oh my giddy aunt, how do I do that? 150 minutes of moderate exercise, 150 minutes a week. Okay, so that's 30 minutes 5 times a week. Now, some of you, before all of this, would have been smashing that out. You'd have been doing that, but you may have now been struggling to do that. Some of you, you might be back up to that. And if you are, brilliant. If you're not, don't be hard on yourself at all. Okay, it's a question of doing what you can at the time. That is what's recommended, and that's what's a really good aim to have, but it won't be for everybody. Okay, but it is something to bear in mind. Now, in terms of what we call moderate exercise, it's where you're out for a walk, you can still have a chat, but you're feeling a bit puffed. Okay, now that the beauty of that description is that it's whatever level you're at. So that might be walking at 3 miles an hour, that might be walking at 1 mile an hour. Does not matter. The level is the same for you, that you can have a conversation, but you're still a little bit puffed. Okay, so really important. Now, the next thing makes me very excited. So the next bit is 2 to 3 resistance workouts a week. The other thing to say is that it needs to be fun, obviously. So it might be that it's not a walk. If you're really just not a big fan of walking, that's fine. You know, put on some music, have a dance in the kitchen, put on a Zumba video, anything that you enjoy, that you can do at your level. That's what we want. Okay. Right. Now, having then thought about getting going is then a question of making sure that you're okay as you're doing it. All right. And this is really, really crucial. Listen to your body. So if you're getting pain, okay, if you're getting swelling, pins and needles, signs of infection, stiffness, check with somebody who knows, okay, and GP, nurse, physio, somebody that you trust and that will listen carefully. All right, so that's really, really important, and keep monitoring it. And the last thing I put on that one is be honest with yourself. You know, if you're anything like a lot of the people I treat, they'll put a brave face on it, and that's fine to an extent, but don't go too brave. Okay, right, now this is the exciting bit, the resistance training. So when I taught resistance, here's my prop. It might only be a tin. Okay, this is enough resistance for some people. Okay, it might be a dumbbell. Okay, it might be some resistance band. So using your strength is really important to stop that loss of muscle mass and to build your bone density. Okay, really also useful for fatigue. So you can use lots of different ways, and it's also great for reducing your balance issues and falls risk, and helps you feel a lot better. Fatigue, and again, exercising the right level at the right point is a useful tool. Okay, so resting is really important, not too much, but exercising is also really important. Okay, so that fatigue, which you'll all know about, that sort of emotional, mental, physical fatigue is so common. But if you can use particularly the strengthening exercises a couple of times a week, 2-3 times a week, you might find that it just helps you with that. Okay, so a good sleep routine, really, really important. Taking a couple of naps rather than one long one, and staying really active with your exercise. Now, as I've also said, making sure that you aren't doing exercise at the expense of being able to see your friends, being able to do the shopping, manage your day, plan your day as part of that. Celebrate your wins. This is really the beauty of exercise, I think, is that it gives you something you can be proud of, that you've done, that you've achieved. And if you set yourself the right goals, so don't set yourself running up and down Everest, but if you set yourself something that's realistic that you can achieve, that might be for some people getting up and down the stairs. That might be standing up from the chair on your own. That might be walking to the shops. Whatever it is, at whatever stage you are, be proud of those goals that you achieve. And you will find that if you set the goals at the right level, you will be able to achieve more than you think.
So I think of energy as a bit like a bank account. And every single activity that we do during the day costs a different amount of energy. And these aren't just physical things, these are also mental things and emotional things. So although running up and down the stairs could be very, very expensive and maybe not even possible for many people, then sitting on the sofa will still be using a certain amount of energy. So these are all the things that we've got on the left, where we've got the little piggy bank with the money going out. Then you'll also see on the right, we've got a little piggy bank with money coming back in. And these are things that you do during the day which give you a boost of energy. So these are things like rest, relaxation, maybe a cup of tea with a friend, activities that you enjoy, colouring, anything which really affects your life to just give you that little bit of a pickup. So this energy bank is a very, very important way of thinking about it. So with the cancer-related problems with energy levels, it's a bit like being on a budget. So when we're thinking about where you can spend your energy, something which when you were, say, 17, might have been not using up much of your energy budget at all, is now going to be using up more because your budget is that much smaller. This is another thing that tends to happen with our energy levels. So what happens is we have this boom and bust. So some days, and it's reported an awful lot, some days people say, oh, I had lots and lots of energy that day. And then later in the day, I was absolutely exhausted, or the next day, I was absolutely exhausted. And this is what we call boom and bust. So as you'll see here, this is an example of a good day. Someone's got lots of energy, so they do lots of activity. And then what happens is when people overdo what they've got, they start going down into what I would call into the red in their bank account. And the temptation is, on a good day, you want to do a lot, so you do a lot. But if you overspend your energy budget, you go into the red. And when you go into the red, it takes a long time to pay that interest back. So the next time you have a good day, it's not quite so good. And the bad day might then be even worse. And you can see that over time, the good days can become a lot less than the bad days. So what we are trying to do with energy management techniques and fatigue management techniques is to try and level this out so that there's not so much of this ups and downs. So that on a good day, if you can become aware of what your energy levels are and how much each activity costs you in the way of energy, then hopefully you can spend less and not go so much into the red. So ways of saving energy are doing things to reduce the amount of energy that you're spending. And these can be things like working out which things drain your energy levels and which things give you a boost. So this can be quite a nice thing to do. And it can be something that you can do either yourself or with somebody else. And then thinking about the things which drain your energy levels, is there any way that you can do those activities less often or do them in a different way? So for example, if we were thinking of, say, hoovering. So some people like to, or used to like to hoover regularly every day, every other day, or even every week. Maybe you could do it less often, maybe every other week. Is there something that would make a task easier? So for something, sitting down instead of standing will use a lot less energy. So there's lots of different things that we can think about for each activity that might help make that easier. Can you break that activity down into smaller chunks so that you don't have to think of doing the whole thing at once? And could somebody else do any or all of a task? And that can be one of the most tricky things to think about. And then thinking about the things which give you a boost. Now, these things are really important. And what we're needing to do is to see whether, do we actually really need to do all of these things? Where are your priorities? Would something which gives you a boost be a better thing to do with your energy levels? But these are your energy levels, it's your budget. So it's up to you to choose what would be better for you, what you think would work for you as a way to use your energy. But it's really useful to fit at least some of these into your day. And you can use these as a way to break up bigger tasks as well. So I've talked a little bit about pacing. And here are some of the different things that we can think of for rest and relaxation. Now, when people get fatigued, a lot of people will nap. And sometimes these naps are quite long naps. And what can happen with that is the nap, to try and regain your energy level, will actually be a long period, which can then affect your sleep at night. So when we're talking about relaxation, if you're using naps as a way of resting, then try to limit these for 20 minutes maximum. Try, ideally not to nap, but if you do need to nap, 20 minutes maximum, and ideally not after 3 p.m. So other ways of pacing yourself are to break things up with some sessions of mindfulness, relaxation. So mindfulness is just allowing yourself to just be in the here and now, and not focusing on things that have happened in the past, and not focusing on things that have happened or yet to come. So it's a real way of allowing your mind to have a rest, because as we were saying, when you're feeling fatigued, the anxieties and worries about the future or thoughts about the past, these emotions can be very, very draining. So mindfulness can be a really nice way of just allowing your mind to be still, and that will help with managing energy levels. Relaxation is more of there's different types of relaxation, so that you've got active relaxation, where someone might say, oh, I find it really relaxing to be out in the garden doing things. And in a way, that's a type of mindfulness, because it's a focus on what you're doing here and now. When I'm talking about relaxation, I'm actually meaning sitting down and learning to allow your body to relax. So any tension that your body is holding, which may be increasing your energy levels, to actually physically learn to relax those muscles and allow those muscles to be using less energy. So we have several different ways of fatigue management. Pacing is pacing yourself and your tasks. And it's quite a tricky one. It's knowing yourself. It's understanding where your energy levels are. And this can be quite a tricky thing to learn, but it can be learned. So what pacing is doing is allowing you to become aware of what your inner body is saying. And if your inner body is saying you need to stop, then you need to stop. Do not push yourself. Allow yourself to stop and not push yourself. It's always that last little bit that's going to cost the most. So by learning where your levels are, then you can start planning for that as well. So say, for example, you had enough energy to do something for an hour. If you just plan to do it for 3/4 of an hour, then you've got a little bit of energy left over, and that little bit of energy can add up. So when you're pacing, and all of these things, they all link together. When you're pacing, what you're doing is you're trying to keep that energy loop more even. So recognizing when you need to stop and stopping. Then with the planning, you can actually start thinking, okay, I'm going to plan to do this amount and then rest, and then this amount. But it can be, if you're someone that likes using diaries and things, it can be quite therapeutic to do it. If you're not someone like that, just keeping it in your mind, thinking about what times of day you have more energy and less energy, and then planning to do the things that you want to do in the times when you're having the more energy, and then the things which cost less energy, maybe sitting and reading your book or phoning a friend in times then when you know that your energy levels are going to be lower. The prioritizing is another really difficult thing. It's what is the most important thing to you. And this can, when we're thinking about things that you have to do and things that you enjoy doing, this can be a real balance. And again, this can be a nice thing to do with somebody else. So what is it really important for you to do? If you've only got a certain amount of budget, where do you want to spend that? So you might have enough energy in your budget to clean the house, but is that where you want to spend your energy? Or would you prefer to spending your energy doing something which is going to bring you pleasure? Planning the way you do activities. So if you're going to do an activity, it can be useful to have everything ready for that activity. So, for example, instead of, let's say, showering, instead of collecting everything up for your shower, then having your shower, then drying yourself, then having to get at your clothes and get dressed, maybe do that in sections. So maybe get everything ready for your shower and get your clothes out, and then have a rest before you have your shower. Or maybe somebody else could get some things out for you, and then you can have a shower. So you're still doing part of the activity, which is a part that you want to do. Posture. So posture is another important thing. We've got lots of different muscles in our bodies, and some of the muscles are nice, big, strong muscles, and some of the muscles are much smaller, and the smaller muscles can get tired very quickly. So using your body efficiently will be using the bigger muscles instead of the smaller muscles. So these are like your nice, big thigh muscles when you're bending, rather than the small muscles in your back when you're bending. So crouching down rather than bending forward, or using maybe two hands to do things rather than just one. The biggest P here, I think, is permission. And there's permission to allow yourself to ask for help or to do things differently. And the reason that this is so difficult is because we don't like burdening other people. And we're creatures of habit. We don't like doing things differently. It makes us feel comfortable to do things in a certain way. One way I like to think about this is that permission is a way of managing energy. So by asking for help or by doing things differently, what we're doing is we're helping to allow ourselves to be more in control of the energy. We can't give ourselves more energy. There aren't things out there. So many people say, oh, do you know where I can buy some? We can't do that. But what we can do is work out how to budget what you've got. And so by allowing yourself to do things in a way which might feel really difficult to you, maybe not hoovering so much, maybe not showering every day, that can save you energy to do other things. And ask permission to ask other people to do things as well. Again, what it's doing is it's helping you be in control of where you spend the energy. We can't control how much you've got, but you can learn to use the energy that you do have in the best way possible and budget it in the best way possible.
I'd like you to breathe in for a count of 4, hold for 2, and breathe out for 4. Breathe in for 4, hold for 2, breathe out for 4. Just feel that cool air entering and the warm air leave. Feel your tummy rise and fall. In through the nose and out through the nose. Feel your body becoming heavier and heavier. Allow your limbs and joints to soften. Heavier and heavier. I'd like you to imagine that you're in a very special library. It's a peaceful library, quiet and restful. Take a nice deep breath. breathe in, and then as you breathe out, see yourself in this library. And I'd like you to look at all the shelves and see all the different books. And as you look more carefully at these books, you notice that they're colourful covers. The bright coloured books are for feelings, good feelings and good thoughts. And the grey covered books are for the things that worry you, that stress you. So browsing through these books, I'd like you to take down one of the grey coloured books. Hold it in your hand, feel it in your hand, and then open this book. And I'd like you to try and fill the book with any thoughts, negative, stressful thoughts that are on your mind right now. Fill each page with a worrisome thought, emptying your head, clearing out space for good thoughts. And then when you're ready, I'd like you to close the book and place it back on the shelf, knowing that you can return to this book if you want to. And now I'd like you to take some time looking over the brightly coloured books. Imagine yourself briefly leafing through the white ones, the blue ones, the red and gold books, each colour depicting a different feeling. I'd like you to choose one of the blue books. And inside you notice that it covers things like sunrises and sunsets. And then as you open another page, you feel that the sun is literally bursting out of the pages. The sun feels welcome and soothing. And then as you turn another page, you find a cool, misty morning with the sun seeming to be bright blue in contrast to the white, fluffy clouds. And you notice the clouds are moving through the sky. Imagine the shape and size of these clouds. And below the clouds, you see the blue-green ocean with the peaks of white foam ebbing and flowing. And the waves move in and out, forming patterns in the sand. And you feel peaceful and calm. You feel the sand underneath your feet, the cool waves moving back and forth. And then you leaf through another page in your book and you see yourself lying on a beautiful beach, comfortable and warm. Feel yourself absorbing the warmth of the sunshine, feeling secure and safe, peaceful and calm, listening to the ebb and flow of the waves. And then I'd like you to close your book, getting ready to place your book back on the shelf, knowing that you can come back to these colourful books at any time, where you can empty your negative thoughts and fill your mind with positive thoughts. Place your book back on the shelf. Notice the sound as you place it back. And then slowly bring yourself back into your room, being aware again of your breath. Internalize your thoughts and think about your breathing. In through the nose, out through the nose. Take your mind's eye around your body. Notice how you're feeling. And then slowly bringing yourself back into the room. Tuning back in. Become aware of the sounds around you. Breathing deeper. Begin to move your fingers and your toes, warming up the body once again. And then taking a nice deep breath in, rub the palms together. Place your warm hands over your eyes, looking into the fingertips. Coming out whenever you're ready.